Hey friends, and welcome back to another episode of Mom Strength. I'm your host, SURABHI, and today we're going to get into the topic of shame, especially when it comes to pleasure and sex. And here is the thing, sex is a topic that is awkward or taboo in so many households, still to this day around the world. So the shame that you feel when we talk about sex or pleasure is not it's not uncommon. And so I want to start with that. So in the past couple weeks, I've been talking more about pleasure and sex on my social media, on Instagram. And I have an upcoming workshop on February 23rd to reclaim your pleasure. We're going to spend 60 minutes moving our bodies, breathing, feeling connected to ourselves, and I want you to join me. So that workshop, it is live on Zoom, and there's going to be a replay in case you can't make it live or if you want to watch it again afterwards. And early bird registration is on now. I'm going to share the link with you. You can go to my website, www.thepassionatephysio.ca/reclaim-your-pleasure-workshop. But the link will be attached to the show notes as well. So let's get into this. Why is there such a taboo in 2023 about sex, about our genitals, about our body parts? Let me share a story with you. As I've been talking about pleasure and sex the past few weeks, one of my clients this week said to me, she's like, you know what? I was really surprised, but I had these feelings of shame come up, as I'm seeing your posts and as I'm hearing you talk about it. And she's like, I was really surprised. And, she's a mom of 2 kids, and she was surprised that she had these feelings. And I'm like, you know what? You're not alone. And I'm like, even for me who works with people, works in pelvic health, even for me, it is a more challenging topic to talk about openly. And the reason is that's what I want to talk a bit more about today is just my own history and my upbringing and how that has fostered a space of shame around sex and pleasure and exploration of our sexualities. So I grew up in a Hindu home, in an Indian home in India. I moved to Canada when I was 10, but my parents didn't suddenly change their values or change who they were. They're still Indian. They're still culturally the same. And so I was raised in a household where we literally never uttered the word sex. And now I did a poll on my Instagram asking how many other people were in the same boat. And I think it was something like 80% were in the same boat, right? And that's people of all cultures, right? So we often assume, oh, it's because I'm brown. Oh, it's because I'm, whatever culture. We're so, oppressed and, it's only here. But with this topic in particular, everyone is oppressed. Whatever genitalia you have, you're likely not as comfortable talking about sex as you need to be. Think about it this way. How many of us can say the word shoulder without even thinking about it? Shoulder, shoulder, shoulder. How about elbow? No problem. But then how about clitoris? How about penis? How about scrotum? How about vulva, vagina? All of these words are just other body parts, but yet we don't talk about them openly. And, the first step to dismantling this shame is also within ourselves, yes, but also in our kids, teaching your kids the right body parts to their genitalia, just like you would teach them what their head and shoulders, knees and toes are, right? And so in my household, we just didn't talk about it. Didn't know the names, didn't know anything. We knew what a penis was. I don't even think I knew what my body part was called other than just my privates, right? And I remember being so grateful for sex ed in schools. And this is something that I know across the US as being like dismantled or challenged, but this is basic. Sex ed is important. And yes, there was a lot of room for improvement, right? In the sex ed that I had back in, God knows what year that was, 1998, maybe, 1999. I can't remember which year, but there was a lot of room for improvement. Like I remember there was a condom and a banana, and there was just talk about reproduction. There was no talk about pleasure. I don't even think that the body parts were named appropriately, or if they were, nobody knew. We all just equated female body parts to vaginas and male body parts to penises. And the way we're describing female genitalia as just vaginas, that's really just describing the part of our bodies that babies come out of, and the parts of our bodies that really are more for men's pleasure or people with penises pleasure. The parts of our bodies that are more for our pleasure is our clitoris. So we don't even learn that. Or maybe we learn the term, but nobody really talks about it, right? And so despite me learning about it in school, I could never speak about it at home. Despite me learning about it in school, me and my girlfriends, we never talked about this. And I remember having my first boyfriend when I was 16, and we fooled around, and we went to third base. I love how we're using bases still, but we went to third base, oral sex, and I remember afterwards having another boyfriend and telling him about it because we were asking about our own sexual histories, and he was so ashamed, or he was so disgusted that I would even do that. And like, I felt slut shamed essentially. And by somebody who's like also my age, probably at that time we were 16, 17, I can't remember. And he had grown up from he wasn't Indian, he was white. He grew up in a very religious family, as like I did, and just kind of made me feel like a terrible human for even doing that, quote unquote, right? And I was thinking back then, like, I didn't really feel that much shame at that point, even though it was a stigmatized topic and I couldn't talk about it at home. I still didn't feel ashamed. But then that did bring about a lot of shame, and like I was doing something wrong. And I was like, wait, like my culture is telling me I'm doing something wrong, but I thought at least like Western culture and Canadian culture wouldn't judge me for this. But even Western culture is judging me? Oh, like maybe this is wrong. And so bit by bit, I think I started to internalize that more and more. And then when I became full-blown adult and went off to university and whatnot, through dating and relationships, now I can look back and say that I don't think I fully ever explored my sexuality and my desire. I always felt a bit of shame. I always hung on to that shame. And even our cultural, societal messaging encourages that, right? Men get high fives for talking about their conquests, and women we just don't talk about it, right? Or in very small circles, you actually talk about this openly. And so I think that anything you don't talk about remains taboo. It remains mysterious. It remains problematic. And so I want to talk about this today because I don't see a lot of Indian women talk about this. I don't see a lot of women, period, talk about this. And I know that if my patient was feeling shame, I know that she's not alone. A lot of the people that I polled on my Instagram audience, a lot of them said that. I asked them, I'm like, do you feel like you deserve pleasure? And a good portion, probably 75%, said yes. And 25% said, I'm still, working through that, right? Like even just understanding that you are deserving of pleasure. And pleasure doesn't have to be sex, by the way. It can be something completely different. Pleasure is, everybody experiences pleasure every day, whether you feel the sun on your cheeks or you're putting lotion on, you have dry skin, you put lotion on, anything can be pleasurable, but do you even feel you're deserving of it, right? For the longest time, I didn't think I felt that way, or I didn't think I deserved pleasure because my culture had told me, no, this isn't for you. Relationships had kind of made me feel ashamed for that. And that all of that is in my head, right? Like during every, sexual experience, you can't help but have all that messaging still kind of clog up your brain. And then fast forward, having babies. And, most of us, or I don't want to say most of us, but many of us had babies through sex. But we just don't talk about it, right? And then we have babies and we're exhausted postpartum and we're sleep deprived and we're touched out. And, it may not be a priority for many families postpartum. And that's okay too. And I want to normalize that and normalize that if it is a big priority for you in your relationship and you want to get back to it ASAP, great. Everything is fine. But I also just think that there's so many people postpartum who don't feel supported in their return back to sex. And this is something that I help my clients with because they get told at 6 weeks, oh yeah, my doctor said I can go back to exercise and sex. And what does that mean, right? What do we define as sex? Do we define that as, penis and vagina sex? Because that's just one type of sex. And so when we don't have our own definitions, we might go by what society defines that for us. In the cultural messaging of what sex is, it's penis and vagina sex. But you can define that to be whatever it is for you, whether it's toy, whether it's manual stimulation, oral stimulation, anal, whatever it is for you. And the return back to sex doesn't have to be, oh, it's only considered a checkbox, I return back if it's penis and vagina sex, right? It can be whatever it needs to be for you. And let's consider that most people with vulvas orgasm through clitoral stimulation, not vaginal stimulation. Yes, you can stimulate the clitoris from inside the vagina because the bulbs of the clitoris actually hug the vaginal walls, but even outside that, it's direct clitoral stimulation orally, manually, with a toy that actually helps women experience, or people with vulvas experience, pleasure. So why don't we count that as sex? Why is sex only, whether we're able to have intercourse, right? So defining it for ourselves helps take that pressure off of, I'm not having a good sex life because I'm not doing X, Y, Z. And it also helps take the pressure off for so many people who have pain with intercourse and pain with even arousal, especially if you have any vaginal or perineal tearing or scar tissue after an episiotomy. Or natural tearing, surgeries, stitches. You may have some scar tissue still kind of restricting your some of the pelvic floor muscles, their contraction, and some of the pelvic floor muscles actually just attach to the clitoris. So even arousal, when your clitoris gets engorged or erect, just like a penis would, that might actually be painful for some people. So they're not going to desire sex if it hurts or if it doesn't feel good, or if they're feeling body conscious postpartum, or if they're feeling insecure for whatever reason, exhaustion, relationship changes, feeling resentful if their partner is not as supportive as they want, mental health challenges. There's a lot of reasons for low desire, low libido, low arousal postpartum, but when we, again, going back to the definition of what sex is to you, when we use these heteronormative standards, it really doesn't benefit anybody, right? And so I always say, you know what? You can have sex. You can do whatever doesn't hurt, and we can work towards your goals, whatever your goals may be. And a lot of the times it's releasing scar tissue, releasing tension that we hold in our pelvic floors, and also strengthening the muscles that surround the pelvic floor. So it's multifold, right? So in my workshop next month, what we're actually going to do is we're going to practice breathing, expanding the pelvic floor, diaphragm, core, that whole canister and connection. We're going to practice bringing more blood flow into our clitoris, into our vulva, into our pelvic floor. We're going to practice releasing and unclenching tight muscles and tension. And we're also going to practice moving our bodies and releasing our sensual or sexual energies. Now, this workshop is just as much for me as it is for you, right? And I'm sharing my own background, with my history of shame and the stuff that I've been unpacking over the past few years with therapy and with my own exploration. It is an important part of it doesn't have to be an important part of you, first of all. If you're like, I am, there are people who are asexual or they're just not interested in sex, and that's great. That's fine. You may explore pleasure in other ways. But for many people who are sexual beings, your sexuality is a part of you, even if you're a mother, even if you're not represented on those billboards, on those Victoria's Secret catalogs, even if somebody who doesn't look like you is not represented. Sex still is for you. Pleasure is still for you. It still belongs to you. Your body still belongs to you. Your body is still desirable. You still deserve pleasure, and you still deserve to feel desired. And unfortunately, we've been brainwashed, is the easiest way, or conditioned, to believe that when you're young and you look youthful and you've got your red lipstick on and the push-up bra and, not the leaky breasts and, not the stretch marks, not the rolls, when everything's tucked in, that's when you're sexual, right? That's what we're led to believe our entire lives. So even if logically we know that that's BS, you end up internalizing that messaging. And it is hard to unpack. It takes work to unpack that. Not thinking about it and just pushing those thoughts aside doesn't work. You actually have to unpack that. You actually have to explore presence in your body, explore sexuality in your body, and make it fun, right? Don't make it another chore or thing to do, but just even exploring pleasure in your body. So my next solo episode is going to be about 4 tips to improving your pleasure and your orgasm. So stay tuned. Go sign up for my workshop next month. Early bird signups are on right now. I would love to have you. And I know a lot of you, 80% or, who said you felt shame or you weren't allowed to utter the word sex in your household. I know there's a lot of us. And this workshop is especially for y'all and for me and people who like me who grew up feeling shame around it or guilt around it or guilt even around their desires, like it was wrong. It's not wrong. It's a normal human need. And you're allowed to be a human, just in case you forgot. So whether you're single, you're partnered, whatever your state is, your sexuality is first and foremost for you, not for your partner. So once you can become more comfortable with yourself, it gets easier to then explore that with a partner or partners. And so I want you to take this time for yourself. Set aside an hour, find a quiet space, tune out your kids, your babies, put your headphones in and come join me and a bunch of other folks who want to feel empowered and who want to reclaim and unleash their inner pleasure.